History's strange, it's alien, and it won't give us what we would like to have.
Glad you're here for hour 3 of a Tuesday morning. It's the 3rd of June, 2025. The McPherson Financial Group, our hour sponsor. Dave Bowman with us throughout the day. And in this hour, every Tuesday, it is Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. We are in the early stages of Dave's Liberty 250 series as we take a look to the run-up to July 4th of 1776. Dave, we stole the headline from BillMick.com from your comments about the show today. Treasonous Tuesday. We're getting into treason in the colonies, my friend?
In the wake of the French and Indian War, the end of that in 1763, along with, as we talked about, the proclamation of 1763 that limited where colonials could go. They couldn't go west of the Appalachians. The British government decided that under the leadership of King George, that this molasses tax that we talked about before, we're going to start enforcing that. And we're going to leave troops there to deal with this. And so they passed 2 new laws known as the Sugar Act and, of course, the more infamous Stamp Act, which resulted in great consternation in the colonies. By early 1765, in Virginia, there was a meeting of the House of Burgesses, their colonial legislature, at which the state was deciding they were debating, how are we going to respond to this? There was a call for what was being known as the Stamp Act Congress, where the colonies were going to get together and say, well, let's take some united action. And Virginia was debating this. And as they were debating this, at that point, little, or perhaps even not at all known, Virginia legislator by the name of Patrick Henry took the floor. Now imagine this, it's a very hot day, there's no air conditioning, people wear very heavy clothing. It's a recipe for anger. What he delivered that day was not just a protest against the Stamp Act. It was a thunderclap of political courage, a moment that will electrify the colonies and will actually help to ignite what will become the American Revolution. He's just 29 years old. He's intense. He's thin. He has a gift for speaking. And he is very angry about the Stamp Act, and we'll talk a little bit more about why coming up here. But as he rises from his seat and begins to speak, he proposes a series of resolutions declaring that only Virginians can legislate Virginia. Only our legislature, this building, this House of Burgesses, has any authority to legislate anything that happens into Virginia. The speech is bold. Even by the standard of that day, remember that Parliament believed that it and it alone had supremacy to legislate. And now here's Patrick Henry saying, no, we're in charge here, not you. He worked his way through a series of comparisons. And while he did not name him by name, he compared King George III to past tyrants. Specifically, he referred to Julius Caesar. And when he did this, there was a great deal of unrest in the room, a great deal of, there's a line here that Patrick Henry didn't just, tiptoe up to. He's gone over. He's called King George the equivalent of Julius Caesar. The cries were immediate and they were intense. This is treason. You've gone too far. This is treason. Patrick Henry kind of stood there for a moment and then he said those famous words, if this is treason, let us make the most of it.
We see where it takes us in a minute on WMMB. Dave Bowman bringing us Dave Does History. So if this be treason, let's make the most of it. Where are we going here, David? Sounds rather contentious there.
We asked the question last week before, I don't remember. Why is it that we as Americans see King George III as a tyrant? It's a very interesting word, tyrant. What does it mean? What is a tyrant? Now, we have in our brains today, we have this mindset of what a tyrant is. But clearly, King George III is not that. So what is it that we perceive here? In the colonial period, particularly in this era, we need to keep some things in mind. The average American, not necessarily the framers or the founding fathers, but the average American, the Charles Holts, the Ebenezers, the Isaacs, the Marthas, were far more familiar with the histories of Plutarch and Livy than they were the Bible. They were far more ingrained in Roman history than they were necessarily in religion. These were things, because religion was so different from New England to Georgia, it was hard to find anything, homogenous. But Roman history was, and they all knew it. They knew it so well that even George Washington's army was entertained with Roman plays during their stay at Valley Forge. And it's these Romans that have this idea of what a tyranny actually is. And this is what is ingrained in Americans. For Romans, any monarchy is a tyranny. That's the first, going back to the founding of the Republic in 509 BCE. The very fact is that Roman citizens are required to take an oath from that point forward to kill any person who tries to set themselves up as a monarch. You have a duty as a Roman to destroy anyone who sets themselves up as a monarchy. Now, that's a little hard when you're British, but there are some conditions that kind of become added in here. There's this idea of someone as a tyrant who violates the traditional checks and balances, holding on to power too long, ignoring the Senate, ignoring the legislatures, or even just bypassing the people. There's this idea of concentration of offices, holding multiple offices at once. Remember, in Rome, you couldn't do that. Refusing to step down, using emergency powers beyond necessity. These are all red flags in the idea of a tyrant. There were two in particular in Rome, a guy by the name of Sulla, we're not going to talk about today, and a second guy who was declared dictator for life. You know who that guy was? Julius Caesar. We think today of Julius Caesar as kind of this hero. He's been through Shakespeare, through Cecil B. DeMille, through the movies. Caesar has become this very sympathetic figure to us. But to Romans, he was very much a populist and very much a tyrant. He disregarded liberty, the freedom of citizens to be free from domination by one man. He ruled through fear, violence, personal loyalty rather than law, began to rewrite laws. And in fact, Julius Caesar, had his own image appear on coinage, which was unthinkable to a Roman citizen. The rise of client armies in Rome became part of that problem. And this idea, in short, became that a tyrant isn't just a bad leader, he's a political criminal. And remember that Romans had pledged to destroy any man who set himself up as king. Julius Caesar was setting himself up as a king. A man named Brutus has almost no choice but to assassinate Caesar. And the Americans of that era saw that as a positive thing, not a negative. They didn't see the assassination of Caesar as a tragedy. They saw that as a necessity to secure an existential threat to liberty, to live free rather than under the rule of a king.
And there's the comparison as we have it. We see where it takes us as Dave Does History continues in moments right here.
Our weekly dive into history. Dave Bowman joins us on Bill Mick Live.
It is Liberty 250 continuing, a treasonous Tuesday in the pre-Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death days. Patrick Henry stirring up things in the Virginia House. Dave, what's going on here now?
So what caused all this brouhaha in the House of Burgesses with Patrick Henry basically calling King George III Julius Caesar, a tyrant? Well, as we said, in the aftermath of the French and Indian War, the British started realizing that these colonials are getting a little too big for their britches, and we don't like that. We're going to start controlling some things. We talked at length about the molasses tax last week. First thing the British do is they pass something called the Sugar Act. Now, this is a replacement for the Molasses Act of 1733. And the first thing it does, Bill, and sometimes you'll hear this from people who want to mock the American Revolution, but the tax on tea was less than the import duties on other stuff, so why would we revolt? Well, this does the same thing. It actually lowers that tax on French molasses from 6 pence a gallon to 3 pence a gallon. Cuts it in half. It's a 50% tax cut. Why would you be upset about that?
Yeah, because governments push their tax cuts every chance they get.
Right. Well, the reason we're upset about it is because, well, now the British are going to enforce it strictly. And there was a lot of negotiation where the colonials basically told Parliament, look, if you cut it to 1 cent, we'll pay it. Then it will be worth it to us to not import, to not smuggle French molasses. Cut it to 1 cent, we'll buy it, and you'll make more money. But the British said, no, we're in charge. We're going to do it our way, and it's going to be 3 cents. And so, as you can guess, things didn't get much better. They also imposed taxes on sugar, wine, coffee, which was rapidly becoming the drink of choice in America, and textiles, which of course were big in New England. It required much more detailed cargo logs, shifted smuggling cases out of civilian courts and into the admiralty courts. No juries. You get caught smuggling, you don't get to stand in front of your compatriots in Boston and have a trial there. Now you're going to be tried by British Royal Navy officers and no jury. The idea here was to raise revenue, but is that really the best way to do it? Probably not.
Back at it, Dave. Where are we going here?
So the second law that the British passed is what's infamously known, and of course everybody's heard of this, the Stamp Act. Now, it's the Stamp Act that really causes the problems. The Sugar Act is inconvenient. It's regulation of commercial businesses. It's harsh, but like Californians put up with nonsense, we can work around that. But the Stamp Act is different. It's a direct internal tax on paper goods, newspapers, legal documents, dice, playing cards, and it requires British currency for payment. You cannot use colonial scrips to pay for it. You must use British money. And if you're caught violating it, once again, you're taken to a court in England with no jury. So that right is being violated.
Okay.
Again, the Sugar Act, it's commercial regulation. It's harsh, but it's a pain in the butt, but we can get around that. But this Stamp Act, this is a direct political violation. It's a direct attack on colonial legislative authority. And that's why the House of Burgesses is meeting, along with some of the other things, where Patrick Henry is going to stand up and make his speech, because this isn't just a tax. This is an attack on the independence, the liberty, the right to self-government, the right to be free from the control of a king by both Parliament and King George III. King George III is a very astute politician. He has bought as many ministers of Parliament as he possibly can. He is guiding, he has chosen his own ministers. And although he's somewhat unique amongst kings, Bill, because he chooses ministers from both parties, most of them only choose it from the party that they personally favor. He chooses them from both parties, and he gets people that are yes men for him. This is much like Julius Caesar surrounds himself with Mark Antonies and the like. He's doing a lot of the same things. And Patrick Henry and many other Americans notice this. And of course, they're steeped in these traditions. That Stamp Act is a direct attack on the Virginia House of Burgesses, the Massachusetts legislature. It is basically saying, we run things, not you. Which is, of course, a British idea that Parliament has established its supremacy. Parliament has the right to legislate for the entirety of the empire. This is something that they believe. Up to this point, though, as we've seen, they don't really care. But now, all of a sudden, in the post-World War era, they begin to infiltrate things, I guess. They begin to take over things. Taxation really isn't about regulating trade. It's about revenue extraction and, more importantly, control. That's why you quarter troops in people's houses. You are controlling their behavior. By way of, modern examples, we have, smart thermostats now. What are those smart thermostats? What are they really doing? They're controlling your behavior.
Yeah, absolutely.
Might be an interesting Third Amendment case, which has never happened before. This shift feels more like the British Crown is directly reaching into the pockets now of every colonialist, because every one of them has paper. They like newspapers. They like books. They like legal documents, to sell their land or buy a cow or whatever. You need a legal document for that. And it has to have that stamp on there, and it has to be paid with British currency. You want to play dice games, which were very popular, in the United States, despite Puritan influences. They were, you have to have that stamp. This is the King of England, who Patrick Henry has now called a tyrant, reaching into the pocket of every American colonial citizen and saying, I'll take that. And while I'm taking that, I'm going to tell you how to behave. And this, although we're not going to call it yet, this is an intolerable thing. And this is going to create a great deal of stress between the colonies and particular Parliament, which thinks that it has the right to legislate, and of course King George, who thinks that he's running Parliament. And
do the colonials think anything as far as a difference between the king and the Parliament? Are they laying it on one or the other, or is it all in one basket?
They see King George as Julius Caesar, and they see Parliament as the Senate, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
Very good. And we continue with Dave Does History in moments on Bill Mick Live.
Call Bill now, 321-768-1240.
This weekend on the Florida Roundtable, Chris Muro joins me, and we're going to take a look at new law and a whole bevy of new laws in the state of Florida and the implication for us. That's this weekend on WMMB with the Florida Roundtable. Looking forward to that. McPherson Financial Group is this hour's sponsor of the show. We're with a tyrannical king, a treasonous Virginia house, and we are 11, 12 years before July 4th, 1776. Dave, this has been going on for a while, and this is where the fire really gets going, it looks like.
And remember that July 4th, 1776 is going to happen more than a year after the first shots are fired. So we got a long way to go here.
Yeah.
When the Stamp Act, of course, is announced and passed on to the American colonies, there is an immediate backlash. Every social level of Americans is just absolutely incensed. Again, it's this being steeped in Roman history, this understanding of what a tyranny is. To us today, again, we don't necessarily see Julius Caesar in that way because we've been conditioned otherwise. We We see Julius Caesar as this tragic figure who was, stuffing Cleopatra on the side and blah, blah, blah. But in most of history, and particularly the American colonial period, Julius Caesar is a bad guy. He is a dictator. He is a tyrant. He is the definition of someone who is abusing power. And again, every Roman citizen from 509 BCE on has an oath to kill tyrants, to murder them, to eliminate them. And that's why it's no surprise that a guy named Brutus in 44 BCE is the kind of the leader of the people that get rid of Caesar in an attempt to restore republican values. This Stamp Act causes 9 of the colonies to form what's known as the Stamp Act Congress in October of 1765. They're going to issue unified grievances. They're going to send to Parliament, hey, you might not want to do this. But even that bill is not quite as effective as the people's response to it. Merchants start boycotting British goods. We just won't buy your stuff because we're not going to pay for the stamp. So all these London merchants that are used to shipping stuff over to the colonies to sell, all of a sudden aren't getting any sales. And keep in mind that the orders for these sales, all this stuff travels by ship. It takes months, weeks at best, but months certainly, for an order to come from Boston to London saying, hey, we want, 100 of these. And by the time they get that order and they start filling this stuff out, the next ship comes in and says, oh, cancel that order. We start seeing groups. We're going to talk next week about the Sons of Liberty, who are going to organize demonstrations and mob actions. The people who are actually in charge of the stamp distribution, the tax collectors with the stamps, they start quitting their jobs because people explain to them that, no, you shouldn't be doing that. You're being disloyal. You're no different than the tax collectors of old.
Are these fellow colonists, or are they employees of the crown or been sent by the crown?
Employees of the crown in most cases, but they're fellow colonists.
Okay. Although
some of them arrive over. Newspapers start running blank pages of news. They print a paper that has blank pages in it so that they don't have to put the stamp on it. And of course, in May of 1765, Patrick Henry captures the entire mood when he compares King George III, although not by name, to tyrants in history, specifically Julius Caesar. And when he's accused of treason, he comes back with that incredible reply: if this be treason, make the most of it. The colonies are going to learn from this the power of coordination, how to work together. This is the mistake that Parliament is making, that King George is making. He is making the colonies, instead of 13 independent colonies that kind of have the same, we're on the same seaboard, but now this is when you're going to see the era of that join or die political cartoon. Political identity is going to begin to shift from being a loyal British subject to becoming a self-aware American. We're British subjects, but we're not getting the rights of Englishmen. We have no, as James Otis will say, no representation. And yet they're taxing us. And this idea of liberty begins to move from this Enlightenment theory, what should happen, to what's got to happen to make this work. And it all starts with this idea of Roman history shaping an Enlightenment understanding of what is a tyranny. I ask that question every time I talk about this. Why do we see King George III as a tyrant? The reason we see him as a tyrant, the reason we're going to list 27 reasons why we're mad at him, is because he is behaving in many of the same ways that Julius Caesar did. And Julius Caesar, regardless of what film you may have watched, was a bad guy. He was a dictator. He was a tyrant. He violated every common, decent theory of how a Roman citizen should obey. How did he get away with it for so long? Well, get enough money, you can buy off people. You can become a populist. You can convince people that we should do it my way. But there are always those who are going to stand for what is right. In the case of Rome, the assassination of Julius Caesar leads to civil war and the establishment of an empire. The Republic will lose. And you might say to yourself, well, why don't Americans take that lesson that the Republic is going to lose? Because they don't believe they're going to. They believe that it's better to stand as a free man and lose than it is to kneel before any tyrant. That is the classical idea of liberty, to resist to the bitter end.
We pick it up in just 30 seconds on WMMB. 321-768-1240 if you want in as we wrap up. Dave Does History on a Tuesday morning. So, Dave, even there were those in the colonies who saw this differently. How prevailing was this idea?
The traditional rule of thumb is that there are a third of American colonists who are what we would call patriots, a third who are Tories or loyal to the crown, and a third that are just, I don't care, just leave me alone. And of course, like politics today, it's that middle section that you have to convince one way or the other. There are Tories, there are people who are loyal to the crown. And think about how radical this idea is. Even the people we are going to call patriots right now have spent their whole life up to this point as loyal British subjects. What has pushed them to the point now where they're willing to say, this is wrong, and we're not going to tolerate it? What does it take to push someone to that point? What it takes is a tyranny that says, I rule you, you will do what I say, even if you could make the argument that, is it really that big a deal? I mean, they cut the molasses tax 50%. Shouldn't you just be happy with that? Can't you just be okay with that? No, because what a tyrant does is he takes away your liberty, your self-determination. This is what Julius Caesar was doing. It's what King George III is doing, and it's why we consider him to be a tyrant.
And today in America, Dave, we've got half of the country that likes the centralized government, wants to see it grow, wants to see it control all of these elements of everything. And we've got another half, and I would say less than half, because how many on the right aren't as far right as they need to be, that are saying, this is not the freedom we thought we had. Like when we opened the show this morning, how free is one part of the country compared to another?
And how does that side that favors that stuff, why do they favor it? Because they're getting something out of it, right? The government is in some way.
That would be my argument, yeah.
Paying them off. This is exactly what Caesar did. This is exactly what he did. He paid off people. He paid off army. He bought an army. He bought off troops. He bought off leaders. He was, Caesar's general philosophy was, don't fight if you can pay for it. And he did a lot of that.
All right. Very good. I wonder about how we respond today, or do we have the ability to respond today the way we might need to? Line one, you're up on Bill Mick Live. Good morning.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Bill. This is Barry in Palm Bay.
Yeah, Barry.
Mr. Bowman, one of my favorite movies about this time was 1776 with William Daniels and Howard da Silva, Ken Howard, and others. And I don't remember if there was a character played. I don't remember if Patrick Henry was in that movie. I don't think so. But it was about, the Declaration of Independence. Did Patrick Henry have anything to do with that?
Thanks, Barry. Appreciate it. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, his involvement in it is as a member of the House of the Burgesses. Yes, he has something to do with it. In fact, he's the one who will, in 1775, say, give me liberty or give me death, which is really going to be a driving issue. I don't recall if he's in the movie. I didn't write the script, and I certainly didn't write the songs, so can't tell.
Line two, you're up on Bill Mick Live. Good morning.
Good morning, Bobby by the beach.
Yeah, Bobby, make her quick, sir.
Yeah, I think, it's a good point, the 30%, right? Because we're really more there today than people realize. Look at when they talk about the political statistics, right? They can't get that 25, 35% to not be Democrat, and they don't know who they are. Well, it's from the very origins of our country. You have roughly a third of the people are going to be with it no matter what. So you're really fighting for the 3%, but the media tries to give us, and the political leaders give us perception, everything is 50-50. No, it's not.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate portrayal, Bobby. Got to move on. Line 1, you're up on Bill Mick Live. Good morning.
This is Steve from Melbourne.
Steve, got to make it quick. About out of time here. Go aid.
USAID is an example of this, where you started cutting the USAID, and then all these celebrities, politicians, and stuff that were benefiting from USAID were crying that people. I mean, you got Bono going, 300,000 people are now dead in the world because we cut USAID that wasn't even going to feeding people.
Yeah, exactly. Steve, that's a good point. We're about out of time. Dave, we're a little over half a minute. I'll let you bring it to a close for us.
In the film 1776, Patrick Henry is played by John Voight.
Ah, very
I
good.
Remember that. Next week, we're going to get into the Sons of Liberty next week.
And we look forward to that. Thank you to the McPherson Financial Group for having brought you this hour of Dave Does History on Bill Mick Live. Tomorrow, a wide open Wednesday. Anything you like, whenever you call. Dave and Rod talk about that a little bit on What the Frock. And if you haven't caught that, linked up for you on today's show page, Treasonous Tuesday at BillMick.com. Dave Bowman, thank you, my friend. We'll talk next Tuesday, Sons of Liberty.
See you then.
Check out more stories from history at DaveDoesHistory.org.